right, Jason. So you have such a versatile background from being like an educator to being hands-on in the educational administration perspective of it. Why did you choose to write a book on AI and education?
Yeah, it's a great question, Vange. Well, thanks for having me, first off. I think it's as I was doing my own research. So, as an educator, I use AI myself. I got interested in it. Would have been 2 years ago now. And as I was looking around, I realized there aren't really many resources for people that just want to learn how to use it. A lot of it was figure it out yourself, just try it. Everywhere I went, they said just try it, just keep trying it. But there wasn't really guidance on, as an educator, what do I do with it? How do I apply it in my classroom? How do I set it up in a way that makes sense? How do I use it effectively where I'm not just using it to, mimic something else, where I'm not actually using it to its full potential? So as I was doing all my research, all the studies were about the efficacy. There was a lot of studies about the challenges associated with it, where it's headed, things like that. But it wasn't really much about, okay, here's how to actually use it in your day to day. So I thought for educators, I have that perspective and I can definitely bring that to them. And so that's kind of where the book was born.
Right. So in today's world, I would say AI is a pretty controversial topic. So as someone who has done so much research into AI for educators, like what would an ideal reader of your book look like, or what would be what would their opinion be towards AI? You would say.
So their opinion towards AI, so it has to be someone that has somewhat of an open mind. So if you've kind of already made your decision that AI is no good and it's not useful, the book may or may not help you, and you probably wouldn't pick it up in the first place, to be honest. If you're someone that is more, I'm interested, but I don't know what to do with it. So I'm an educator. I've seen people use it. I see the news. I maybe have some colleagues that use it, and they every so often mention something about it. I've went on myself, maybe even once or twice, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And so that's kind of where this book comes in to really fill in all those gaps of what do they mean when they say prompting? What is a hallucination? I don't know what all these words mean. And so it's really to kind of get them started. But the other place I find it's if you are already using it, but you still want to go to the next step and you don't know where that is, this is also a good kind of medium point as well for someone that is trying to figure out, am I using it to its full potential? Are there ideas I haven't thought of? And that's a lot where this book will come in, is giving you those ideas of how you could be using that, some actual use cases. So in the book, I go into we make up some classrooms and we work with them and I show you, and I actually have in there, here's what a rubric would look like for this activity. Here's some ideas for new activities. Here is how I can use it to, create a newsletter for parents. Like there's so many options out there that I don't think everyone is necessarily aware of. And if you're not aware of it, it's hard to come up with it or to even think of the idea that, oh, I could have used it for that. I never even considered that. So I think that's really where it's coming in.
I see. So I have talked to various entrepreneurs, and I usually ask this question regarding their idea. So I want to ask you: do you think AI in education is a vitamin or a painkiller?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow, that's a really good question. Um, okay, I mean, vitamin or painkiller. So, I mean, I'm understanding the question is vitamin means it's something that assists, it's something that supplements, something that helps you out. Painkiller is something more to get rid of some pain, to get rid of some discomfort. I would say it's more of a vitamin. That would be my stance on it. And the reason is because if you don't use it, you probably are just doing things the way you've always done things. And that's fine because it works for you. It's worked for you for many years. And so it makes sense to you. It's a new tool that you don't even know, you're not aware of. And so your day to day is probably just what it is. Whereas it's a vitamin in the sense that once you start using it, you'll start to notice the effects. You'll start to see differences. Suddenly, something that would have taken you an hour takes you 10 minutes. And you'll be like, wow, just got 50 minutes back of my time, and I can use that for something else that I really want to focus my time on. And so it's really a way to give you those strategies to help you in your day to day where you may not realize there are areas where you're spending a lot of time doing things. And I find for teachers, especially, time is always the thing that we're always crunching on because teachers have so many priorities that they're always dealing with. So I think this is one way to just take off some of that by what we call offloading it. So essentially, instead of me trying to come up with, I need an idea for next week, the AI will start the idea for me. It'll give me a bunch to choose from, and then from there I can build on it. And it's that constant partner to just throw things off of, and it's going to give you maybe idea generation that's going to help. So that's kind of one example of where it would be useful.
Understood. So would you say that obviously educators have to do a lot of tasks, and some of those tasks are like redundant, and they have to do these tasks every single week or every single day. So would you say that AI would help in that and kind of optimize, and it would require less time for educators to do those redundant tasks?
Partly yes, I would say partly it is the redundancy of things where you'll get something and you need to create something or do fill out a spreadsheet or something like that, where it can kind of take over that element for you, and it's just things like data entry or transferring items or quickly scanning something for what's the key idea here. Those kind of ideas, I think it's a lot quicker to do. So redundancy definitely, but I know myself as an educator, I use it a lot for, as I said before, ideas. I use it a lot for brainstorming. I use it a lot for getting new thoughts because as teachers, as we are all great at figuring out things and coming up with creative ideas, but we're only one person, one brain. So at the end of the day, it's helpful just to give us ideas that we would have just never thought of. And sometimes I don't even use the ideas I get, but it sparks a new idea that I wouldn't have had I not gone down that road of trying to figure something out. So I think that's the other element because one of the biggest challenges of teachers is we're always figuring out how do we keep the students engaged at any level, whether you're elementary, secondary, post-secondary. How do I keep you engaged enough? So some people have intrinsic motivation, they just want to do it. Others, they need that little push every so often. And so how do we make sure that they're in a way where they're getting that and they're consistently getting that? Because now they have all these other distractions of things like social media, cell phones, all the other things that are trying to take their attention away from us. And we have to kind of, I don't want to say battle with it, but we have to separate them so that we're just as engaging while they're with us so that they can get what they need, which is their learning.
Understood. So, as you mentioned, you use AI as an educator to for idea generation. Now, what would be the quote unquote traditional method to do it without the use of AI?
That's a good question. I think it's like think, which is like kind of ironic to say, but you just have to really sit down and think about it. A lot of teaching is we don't reinvent the wheel. So I mean, really, what we would do right now is we would go on a Google search and find something, and we may not use it verbatim the way it is, but again, it may give us an idea of something. So we might go in and look up. I need an activity for this group to do this item, and I'll find a great activity where they do something in groups and it gets them engaged and it just makes sense. I may adapt it for my group because obviously whoever made it for their group, and whereas we need to make it for whoever we're teaching at that moment. But that's basically what we do. We find it somewhere, it exists, so people do things like they buy books or they we have a big website called Teachers Pay Teachers. A lot of people go on there where I will make my unit and I'll post it, and then other people can get it for me. So that's another way to do it. But essentially, we find it somewhere. It has to already exist somewhere for us to use it, or we have to make it from scratch, one or the other.
Understood. Okay. So, when we use AI, obviously, like you talked about this in the book, and I feel like this is like the core essence of how to use AI, which is not to use it like a search engine. So, I'm an educator. I need idea generation for this inclusion activity, or let's say I'm trying to teach my students the diversity in Toronto.
Okay.
How do I use AI to make consistent, good, and a good activity to teach the students?
Yeah, I think, and then that's what a lot of teachers are doing. Exactly that. So I need this. It has to fit under my criteria. It has to make sense for my students, for all of my requirements as a teacher to make sure I'm teaching it correctly. All of those items. So, like I said, as my book, and I also recently wrote a LinkedIn post about this, where it's essentially a lot of people use it like a search engine. So they'll just what you just said, they will just type. I need an activity that does this for this, and it will just give you back whatever it has. And then you start to do the iteration, which means that you take what it gave you, and you realize that's not what I meant, or I meant something different. I had a very different idea before I said this, and now the response is not at all matching. And so you respond again. And that I think is the big benefit of AI is you get the opportunity to say, I like this idea, let's build on that. Or you focus too much on this, let's take that away. And then it will give you new responses. And then you can build on that again, and you can keep doing that. And I think that's the biggest thing that's going to help as an educator trying to figure this out. Because the challenge with Google search engine or any search engine is that you type it in, you have to look through the results. If you don't find what you want, you have to type in a new search and start all over again. It's not continuing from where you left off. It doesn't remember, it doesn't understand. So it's just going to start all over again. So the idea of an AI, the best way to use it is you're not assuming that when I put in my first prompt, I'm going to get my final result. That's not at all how it's supposed to be used. That's not what it's meant for. It's meant for I'm going to put in my prompt to start it, see the output I get, and then start working with that output. And then I may focus on different areas. So in my book, I talk about the PARTS acronym. There's a lot of acronyms that exist now, but the PARTS acronym is about it was from a Google course that I had taken when I was starting researching for the book. So I don't remember if I remember the whole acronym, but I'll definitely try. So the first one is persona. So in other words, who is writing this post? So I am a grade 5 teacher, or I am a high university professor. That's going to make a difference because if your audience is grade 5s and your audience is graduate students, very different results. So you have to be clear about your persona, who you are. Once you get into that, you basically want to talk about, again, I'm starting to forget the acronym already, but the ideas behind it are you want to talk about who is your audience. I think that's A. What is it that you're looking for? What's the goal? And then what is going to be in your output? So, in other words, what are you looking for? So, I need a newsletter. I need an activity. I need a PowerPoint slide. So, you have to be clear about that as well because all of those things are very different from each other. And so how it puts together that information is going to look very different as well. So I think that's another area. And again, I'm completely forgetting the acronym, but those are the key ideas that are going to come out of that. And like I said, there's so many acronyms that have come out since, but it's always those key elements that you want to make sure you're saying it. Who are you? Who's your audience? What are you trying to do? And what should it look like when it comes out?
Understood. So yeah, the feedback loop. I think you mentioned that it in your answer. So it's basically the AI giving you prompts and you tell it if it's good or not. So that's like the feedback system. So coming from a background in machine learning, that's called as reinforcement learning, where it's basically a trial and error, where you give the AI agent a prompt and it gives you outputs, and you basically validate or unvalidate the output. So I believe you mentioned it in the book, that prompting is different from inputs. So if you could help me understand the difference between a prompt and an input.
Definitely, yeah. So the input is essentially so there's inputs and outputs. So outputs is what you get back. Input is the information that's coming in. So that is not really done by you as a user. That was done by whoever made the AI. So that could be OpenAI, it could be Google, it could be Microsoft, whoever created it. But that's where all that information is coming from. In the book, I mention a lot. It does come from places like academic journals, places like that, but it also comes from user generated content. So that's things like YouTube, Reddit, all those places, which is kind of an untapped area for knowledge because people don't treat that as it's knowledge. They treat it as it's for fun, it's, casual, things like that. And so one part of my book I really talk about is, there are people on, for example, YouTube that let's say you're an electrician and you've been an electrician for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and you're posting YouTube videos about what you do. That's amazing knowledge. It's not in a textbook. It doesn't exist in a textbook. You're not a writer. You're not going to sit down and write a textbook about here's what I do in the field, but a YouTube video for this person just makes sense. And so now that content is really helpful and really useful. So I think that's kind of something that's being brought into the conversation. So that would be your input. So that's what that's coming from. Your prompt, on the other hand, is as a user, what are you actually typing in? That's a prompt. So if I type in, I would like to learn how do I reinstall this outlet in my house, which I don't think you should do, but I'm just mentioning. How do I reinstall this outlet in my house? And then it'll read from the inputs, it'll take all those inputs, It sorts them. I don't pretend to understand the background. That may be more your
Mm-hmm.
field, but then it will give you an output based on here's what we found, or here's what is the most probable answer to your question that we understand your question. And then from there, again, as we talked about, maybe you didn't get what you wanted, you can iterate. You can change it a bit. You can say, okay, I didn't mean this, I meant that, and so on and so on. Or it's going to, try to kind of get more information out of you because sometimes you don't really give it enough. So it's like, well, what kind of outlet? Like, what are you talking about? Are you in a home? Are you in a business? How many volts is this outlet? All that information. Sometimes we'll ask you those questions as well because it's trying to figure out. I want to give you the answer, but I don't really have enough information.
Got it. So I believe you mentioned it in the book that information that the AI agent gets from those under-reviewed sources are known as artifacts. So what would you say are some effective strategies to identify artifacts in about topics that you have not mastered?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because a lot of people, as you're going in and you're like, I can look up anything, and you're right. I don't know. I actually don't know if the answer makes any sense or not. Some of the quickest strategies I found is to take your output, put it into a different AI, and just say, check this for validity because then it's not using the same background. It doesn't have the conversation you just used. It's just taking that, here's my final output, or wherever you are in your stage, and you give that to a different AI and you say, okay, here is this output. Is it valid? Does it make sense? The other thing that AI is getting better at, which when I wrote the book it wasn't doing this, but now it is you can ask for references. So you can actually go into something called deep thinking. And that's one strategy. You can also just ask in your prompt, include references, but it will start to give you the references of where it's getting the information from. So those both will work, either one. I like the quick one because it's quick, but I like the referencing one as well because I sometimes want to understand how did you get this answer, to your point of like where is it coming from, what is it exactly, is this what I was expecting or not, especially as someone, if I'm not an expert in a certain area, that gives me the chance to learn because now I can go to these references and I can see, okay, this one was, a Reddit post from some person and I don't know who they are. I may not take that as a credible source. Versus this is, as I said, like something like a YouTube video, but this person has been on YouTube for 20 years and they've been posting and they get a lot of positive comments and they seem very reputable. And then you look them up and you see they are reputable. You find their LinkedIn, you find where they work, all the kind of things. So you can very much say, okay, I think this person is legitimate and this does make sense as a source. So kind of using those different means. And again, it's not you taking this and say, okay, now I have to go to a library and find all this information or go to a Google search and find all of it. You can do all of that within the AI that you're in or another AI, it doesn't really matter, but you can ask it, can you prove this? Find this information. Where is this from? And then just like any research, you should always check your sources. Where are you getting things from? So just leveraging the AI to help you to do that.
Understood. So of course, like there are also like a lot of data integrity and privacy concerns about AI, um, which makes AI controversial, I would say. So what would you say are some effective ways to write prompts without compromising that data privacy?
Yeah, and as teachers, as educators, it's critical importance. We all know this. We cannot be anything with data privacy other than fully confidential, respectful, all of those things. So I think one of the biggest ways I do it. So there's a couple strategies. One strategy, and I do this all the time. So let's say I get an email from someone, and they're a little frustrated in their email, and so they have some kind of challenge, whatever it is. They're bringing it to me, and I'm really upset. Here's what happened. I don't agree with this, whatever it might be. I will sometimes take that email and put it into my AI, whichever one I'm using. But what I do is I just remove all the names or anything identifying. So I'll take out the name of the school I'm at, I'll take out the name of people in there, anything that can kind of figure out anything about me. So it becomes more general. So I'm in a high school in a big city. Here's what the situation is. Here's the email I got. How should I respond to this as this position? And then it'll just give me some ideas to try to address it of how I can actually move forward with this person, whoever I got the email from, whether it's a student, a parent, whoever it might be. But it just gives me, again, more tools to be able to figure this out because I can see from their email they're very upset, they're very emotional. I want to be able to address their concern, but I also want to make them feel heard and validated. So I can also put that in my prompt. I would like to make sure this person feels heard and validated, but I need a professional response. And so you can kind of work that together. So that's one strategy, is just like actually just remove everything. The other strategy I found really, really helpful, and I did this when I wrote the whole book. So you'll see it in one of the chapters. I created two personas. So I created, I believe it was a grade 5 teacher and a grade 10 teacher because I wanted a little variety. And I created a fictional classroom for each one. So what I did is I said, okay, here I'm a teacher here. I want to be, one of them is in a big city, one of them is in a small rural neighborhood, both in Canada because I'm in Canada, so that made sense to me. And I just wanted to create diversity in the classroom. So I even put my prompt in there of what I used, and then it gave me a full detailed description of a classroom. So this classroom has this many students in it. It picked a random city from somewhere, and it said they're from here. Some students have these needs, these learning abilities or disabilities, and I kind of created a whole realistic classroom. And I read this and I was like, this is a classroom I can see myself in. It's very realistic to what the current needs are of current students and what teachers are facing right now. So that was another way, because once I do that, I'm not identifying anything about me or my students or my community. So I'm just saying I'm in a big city somewhere in Canada, or even in Ontario or in British Columbia or wherever I happen to be. And it's going to be able to try to pull some of those ideas out. And so from there, now that I have a fictional classroom set up, now I can just prompt it and say, for my fictional classroom, I need this activity. And it understands who's in that room, what I'm doing, what grade level I'm teaching. I can even ask it, I need you to pull from the Ontario curriculum to make sure I'm matching it. I need you to pull from the Growing Success document because I need to make sure I'm hitting all of those requirements as well. And you can have it do that, and it will just keep building into that. And then you just keep using that same persona and that same conversation, and I can just keep building from it. So that's been really effective for me as well, because it just allows me, again, to keep all that privacy. I'm not letting any information out about who anyone is. Nothing is identifiable. If you came and read this, you still wouldn't be able to figure out because I didn't include anything like that. But at the same time, I'm getting what I need in terms of I have to be specific enough to get the use I need. So if I'm too vague and I say I'm a general classroom, I'm going to get a general activity, which is not helpful for me as a teacher. I need something specific for my students.
Got it. So I'm just having trouble understanding, like, as you mentioned, like it's better to like not include the names or not include like any of the personal information. But how do you ensure equity and inclusion while still like being data safe?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, we have things like, let's say you pick something that is what we call an exceptionality. So let's pick autism. So let's say in your classroom or in your school, you have students with autism. You can include in your prompts that I have, two students with low functioning autism and five students with high functioning autism in my school, and I need to do this initiative. And how do I do it? And with all the other information I provided it. Again, from reading my actual prompts in my conversation, you don't know what school I'm talking about. You don't know who students I'm talking about, but I can identify things like that because that is realistic to my school, and that's what I currently have in my school. Or you might say, my school had an incident last year and something happened, and it's created this kind of change, and so I need to start to help the school recover from that change, or shift their mindset a bit, or whatever it might be, without actually talking about what the incident is, when it happened, anything like that. So we can do it in a way where we're including information about the things that I want addressed without attaching them to people.
Understood. So you're so aware about equity and inclusion. Could you elaborate on your experience with equity and inclusion and how you educated yourself? Obviously, it comes with experience, but how did you start?
I don't know if you ever start equity and inclusion. That's
That's
such an interesting way to put it, though. But it's hard for me to pinpoint at this moment was when I kind of realized, because I think for myself, just, with my own being a minority and so on, I think it's just something that I personally grew up with in different points. So, I mean, I'll share a story. I remember when I was in, gosh, it would have been maybe grade 9 or grade 10, maybe even grade 8. And I went to my guidance counselor. So this would have been like the 1990s, just aging myself. And I went to my guidance counselor, and I had ideas then of being a doctor. So that was kind of, a lot of people have that. I want to be a doctor, a lawyer, those kind of things. So I said, I want to be a doctor. That's kind of my interest right now. I think it was probably grade 8. I said, it's very early. I know. I don't really know much about it, but it just seems like an interesting career. And the guidance counselor just point blank just looked me in the face and just said, it's going to be hard with the last name that you have. And that kind of like, I didn't understand it in grade 8 what they were saying, but now as I'm older, I realized kind of what they were getting at was that, with how the society was at that time, certain last names, certain cultures are treated differently. It's an easy way to put it. I don't think that's gone away. I think that still happens in different respects, just in different ways. But for to me being what I would have been 13 or 12 at that time, to hear that from an adult, that's my guidance counselor that's supposed to be helping me, really kind of helps frame what I do now, because it's those kind of moments. And I mean, I don't remember much, but the things like that stick out in my mind for the reason that I remember how I felt when I heard that. And again, I didn't fully understand. I went to talk to my parents, and they're like, they're trying by their best to kind of help me along, and just don't worry about that. Like, you focus on yourself, you do what you need to do, because that's the kind of parents they are, and they're very motivating, which I very much appreciate them for. But it's now that I'm at this age, I'm very aware of things. When I speak, when I'm talking to people, I know how it feels to be on the other side of a conversation like that. And so as I look at how information is being disseminated, how I speak to people, how my colleagues speak to people, how the teachers under me speak to people, I'm aware of it and I'm looking for it. So almost naturally now at this point, because it's something that's just been in my life and I've seen it. And now as you go through, as you said, it's experience, right? So as you meet new people, you learn about their stories and you hear a lot of similarities. So they also had challenges for different reasons, right? So I can't relate to them in the sense that I didn't go through that challenge, but I can relate to the sense that I understand what it's like to go through a challenge and to have that happen to you in your life and to be told something like that and to think about it as, how do I change this? And so for me, I think that's eventually what led me into educational leadership is I want to be in a position where I can affect that change and to see that in my students and all the colleagues I work with and all the educators I work with and keep instilling that in people.
I see. What are some ways you have instilled that in your career?
I think it's a lot of honest conversation sometimes. So, bringing things up. We do a lot of training on just, be aware of things, sensitivity training, just knowing what you can say and when you can say it. So, I think a lot of my current job, my current role, I am the director of education. So we do a lot of medical programs. And a lot of our students have not been in professions before, and they're for the first time entering professions. So you're working with people, you're working in healthcare settings, everything is sensitive information, and people are coming to you at their most vulnerable, right? People don't go to the doctor's office for fun. I always say this all the time. They come because they have a very specific need, and they want to be respected, they want their privacy, but also they need their need addressed. And so as the frontline person helping them, you have to keep all that in mind. So if they come in and they're upset, or they come in, whatever is happening, you need to be the one to kind of, I'm here to help you. We're here to support you. We understand you're going through something. How do we help you? Like, what do you need? And what can we do to make this easier for you? Especially because, we have, for example, a medical office administrator program. People could be coming in to pick up test results of something very significant in their life, and it's going to change your life, whatever these results say. And you have to kind of, it's easy to forget that in your day to day. But that's something we definitely instill in our students, is that you have to always be aware of that and just be ready to have those conversations, but be respectful, is number one. And then also just make sure that you are aware of things. So who else are you talking around? Who's around you when you're speaking? How are you approaching this person? All those little things really, really matter. And I think it's just always good to be cognizant of all of those things. And it's practice. The more you do it, the more you'll learn. If you mess up, you'll know you messed up because you'll get a reaction usually out of people. But it's not a negative thing. It's, okay, wow, I need to be aware that I did something incorrectly there, and I need to correct it for the next time.
Understood. But I believe this is like such a sensitive topic that even like a minor mistake can like create like a big problem. So how do you train your students to actually deal with those mistakes? So say you made a mistake, right? It's a very human thing. People make mistakes every day. Say you made someone feel not included. How do you fix that?
So I think one of our biggest kind of mantras at our school is we have something called the 5 A's. And so these are A's we kind of live by and we really instill in our students. So one of the A's is accountability. And so accountability just means you're able to take responsibility for what you're doing. So if you make a mistake, don't try to cover it up, don't shy away from it, don't hide it. Come out with it and say, "Wow, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that came out wrong. I didn't mean to say it in that way." Whatever it is, they may not accept your apology, but that's okay. It's you being aware of it and you saying, "You know what, I did mess this up." Go talk to your supervisor. I said this, oh, I shouldn't have said this, or I shared this file and that was an accident. How do I fix it? What do I do next? And so I think having that connection with people, but it's something that I know a lot of people are nervous with, especially if you're early in your career, because you feel like a mistake could really change your career. And that, if you come out to your, supervisor, your manager, and you're saying, "Oh, I made a mistake," that you're going to think they're going to take that the wrong way. I always kind of pitch it to students as you hiding a mistake is always worse every time, because as soon as they find that mistake, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you come forward? Why didn't you bring that up to us? All of these things are going to come out. Whereas if you are the one to take that accountability and say, "You know what, I did make a mistake. I filled out a patient file wrong, something like that. I sent the email to the wrong person," whatever it is, then you're showing that I care about the patient, I care about the place I'm working, wherever that is, and I want to make this right. Will it lead to something negative? It could. It's definitely. But at the end of the day, for you as an individual, you know you did correct. So yes, you made a mistake, but you did what you could to correct it. It's not up to you what the manager does with that information or what the company does, but you did what you needed to do. And that's the most important thing. And I think that's a lot of equity work. You're not necessarily going to get praise for anything you're doing. It's more in your heart, you know you did it. And that's what's going to change. And you are going to start to see those effects around you. It may not be immediate, it may not be in the moment, but as you start to grow your network, you'll see the people around you that you happen to be pulling in and attracting. It's because of that. It's that's pulling them in. They see it and they want to be a part of it and they feel comfortable with you at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So, like dealing with the mistake as soon as possible would be the best.
Absolutely, if possible, right? So, I mean, obviously, if they're middle of a busy day, they might have to wait a little bit. Unless it's a critical mistake, then I would say make it a priority. Do what you need to do. But definitely, if you can, deal with it in the moment. Try to adjust to yourself. If you know you can't, get help. Escalate it as needed. Your company, whoever you work for, if you're in school, there's always processes that are available to help you do that. So everywhere has an escalation policy. So I mean, they should anyway, if you were depending on where you are. But that's always something you can use to kind of help you. And I know a lot of people, because I work a lot with policies, and so a lot of people look at the policies as like they're all negative things, right? Because it's like, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that. But policies are really designed for, if I'm in a situation where I don't know what to do, what do I do? Like, what's my next step? How do I get help for this? I don't know. I don't know how to get help. I don't know where to go next. And so that's why these exist, is to give you that route, to give you that pathway. If you're not satisfied with something, go to the next step. Like, that's why it exists, right? So don't kind of take it as, I guess nothing's going to happen now and there's nothing I can do about it.
Absolutely. But I believe for things like these, like the processes don't always do it justice, because like it's so unpredictable. Like you cannot put one of these situations in a box. Like there are so many moving elements to it.
Yeah.
So how do you prepare for these situations? Like say something goes wrong. Like I can't write a processy for it, right? Like I could, but again, there are so many moving elements that it would nearly be impossible to have a processy for that exact situation.
You're correct. Yeah, and I think so. Like my master's degree in education was on educational leadership and policy. So we learned about policies, and the thing I always get feedback about, which I now understand, but I didn't understand, was they're so vague. Like as you said, like they don't really give us much information. But the reason is because, as you said, it's not possible to cover every possibility, right? It's not feasible to do that. It has to be somewhat general because at the end of the day, the people that are enacting the policies are the ones that are going to make those judgment calls. And so as you move into these positions, you are the one that says, okay, I know the policy says this. What is my interpretation of that? What does that mean? How can I best support this student or this teacher or whoever I'm supporting? How can I make sure that they get what they need within the policy that I'm allowed to get it in? So this is why they're often vague, is because, I mean, realistically, they have to be. as you said, it's just you can't get it down to the nitty gritty of, well, in your scenario this is going to happen, but in your scenario, because this one little thing changed, this is going to happen. It's more becomes judgment calls, which are experience over time. As you learn more, you see more. A lot of times you use precedents. So what happened the last time this happened, let's use that. Did that make sense? Did that work as an option? Did it not work as an option? And then build from that. And eventually, every so often, you go back to the policy and say, you know what, we need to adjust it, because actually we're realizing we're missing something in it. And so we have to adjust the wording, or we have to add a step or remove a step in order to make sure we're capturing everyone based on what's currently happening.
Got it. So, of course, like being able to deal with these situations calmly, like comes with a lot of experience. So I read about one of your experience in the book, and I have been wanting to ask you about it ever since. So what was your experience like in Bearskin Lake, Ontario?
So, for those not aware, Bearskin Lake, Ontario, it's a reserve, a First Nations reserve. If you look on a map where Thunder Bay is, if you go a couple hours north, you're in some place called Sioux Lookout. And then if you fly another couple hours north, you're in Bearskin Lake. It's my first time going that far, I can say. I didn't know Ontario was that big, to be completely honest. I grew up in Toronto. I've been here my whole life. I've been around. I do like to travel, but it's just Ontario is such a big province. It's unbelievably big. So this community, just for some background, so while I was a principal of in high school, I was also doing my master's of education. So I was in the middle of my studies. I was doing it part time because I wanted to do it with my studies, or sorry, with my work, so that I can kind of apply what I'm learning, and it was a really good synergy there. But one of my professors came to me because we started talking about Indigenous history, what's happening, things like the residential school was coming out, all of those, kind of things were happening, and it was making the media now. And we read more and more about it, about what's happening and what the history's been and what's currently happening at the time. And we wrote papers about it, we wrote like op-eds about it, things like that. But I wanted to do more. And so I asked one of my professors, I said, like, what can I do? Like, is there something? I just feel like I want to support this cause more than I'm doing right now. And she said, why don't you go up north? That's an option. You can do that. And I said, it is. And she's like, yes. So she connected me with this organization called Teach for Canada, phenomenal organization. So they connect skilled educators with the North. And so I went through that program. But because I was already a principal, I wanted to go up as a principal, as an administrator. I didn't want to go up as a teacher. And so they said they hadn't done that before, but let's try it. Let's see if it works. And it did. So I went through the whole program. They have a very elaborate, like 2 week training program, or 3 week, I can't remember, at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay. So we went up, we got to meet all these great people from all over, mostly Ontario, but also Manitoba, Alberta, so lots of different places. And they all come together. They give us some really strong training, I would say. So they go through like trauma informed practice, they go through what it's like to live in the North. They go through just history of things. So we learn a little bit about, the Inuit, the Métis people, things like that. So just to kind of give us some familiarity with, who we're going to be working with once we get up there. And just a lot of things, to kind of try to prepare us. And I say try because they told us a lot of things and we kind of understood it. But when you get up there, it's completely different. There's no way to explain it. It was the most life, or I guess eye-opening experience I've ever had that completely changed my life. So again, I grew up in Toronto, so we have a population of, I don't know, something in the millions. The Bearskin Lake at the time had a population of 400 people. So basically everyone knows everyone. It's a very small community. The school was kind of one of the big hubs. There are 2 stores. There's a band office. There is a nursing station. It's a very small airport where you can come in and out because you can only fly. There's no other way to get there. And then there's residential areas. And then there's one community center, and that's it. So that's everything. Like, that's all the buildings in the entire community. So very small, very different. What you do when you're up there, that was a real shock for me because, in Toronto, it's a big city. There's lots to do. There's lots available. We got up there the first night, and there was no food because all the stores closed early, and our flight got there late because it was delayed, and we didn't know where to go. We actually had no idea. So it was just a resident came and said, do you guys need some food? I'll go open the store for you. and we just got some, like, I don't know, hot dogs or something, like just something easy for the first night. But they all kind of warned us about that, but we didn't really understand what they meant until we got there. But being up there, I think, challenges aside, and there's many more we can talk about, but it was really, really eye opening in just how down to earth everyone is. So they very much, it's a much slower pace of life. It's not like the city where you're rush, rush, go, go. Let's, like, what's the next thing? It's very much, they live on the land. They do a lot of, cultural activities. They really support that. And it's very much a different pace of life. There's no other way to explain it. So it was really eye opening for me. My days changed, how they looked, like what I did every day was very different. But I think what I really took away from it the most was just how much they're connected with each other and with the land, that I can't explain it. I can't really put it into words, to be completely honest, but it really, really opened my eyes to just a different way of living, and something that really makes people connected in a way I didn't know was possible before.
I see. So, what are some of the things you learned there? And obviously, like, they have a completely different lifestyle. So, you kind of had to adapt to that. So, what are some challenges that you underwent because of that? Just because they had a different lifestyle, not because like it's unconventional or anything.
Mhm.
It's just different. So, what was your experience with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, back to kind of like the priority timing thing. So, as principal of the school, I came in and I said, okay, we have some things we got to make some changes, right? Because as a principal, that's kind of what you do. So, you came in and I said, okay, I see this, I'm going to make changes. So, I figured out who I needed to connect to, I connected to them, and the response you usually got was, okay, we'll get to it. And that was kind of it, right? And eventually, and it's not that, they don't want to do it, it's not anything like that, it's just that's the pace of life. So it's not that, I need to do it by the end of the day. Like, no, there's nothing like that. It's more, okay, we will get to it, it's on the list, or there, if there is a list, who knows, but we will get to it at some point when it comes up. And so it's just kind of the way it works. So things took longer for that reason, just because, longer meaning from my perspective rather. So that's what I see it as. It just took a long time to get things done, which the frustrating part for me was there were some cases where I needed to get something, let's say for a student. So a student had needs, I needed to connect them with someone or get someone for them to really give them that support, and it took longer than I would like it to. Part of that, though, is also because the resources are not there. And so, what I mean by that is, they don't have the funding they need. A lot of things are just not available. It's just difficult to get the resources to them, or there's no willpower to get the resources to them. And so, it just creates these other challenges of, I would like to make sure we can help them, but I don't know what to do. And so, I had a lot of great mentors up there that really helped coach me through that piece, because I wanted to make things move and things were not moving. And I didn't know how to kind of bridge that gap. So that was definitely a big piece of learning for me, and a frustration. I think personally, one thing that I found was it started snowing so early. It started snowing in September, the beginning of September, and by the end of September, it was just covered in snow. Like, that was just normal. The other big one is the daylight is much shorter. So by around December, the sun comes up at like 10 in the morning and it goes down about 2 in the afternoon. So we get maybe 4 hours of sunlight, and during that time we're in the school. So we go to school in the dark and we come home in the dark. So very different experience. I mean, just like right now, we're in winter. It's not having sunlight does affect people. It's like 10 times worse up there. It's, again, from my perspective, because I'm not used to being up there. It was just a very different experience, and it was hard to. It's just always dark and it's always cold, and so it just became difficult. How do I manage this? But eventually, once you kind of get adjusted and you get over that, it becomes fun again, and you get to find new things. Like, we got to go fishing and we got to go hunting, and like things I don't normally do here in the city that I got to try for some of them for the first time. So I think it was, really eye opening in that sense as well.
I see. How long were you there for?
I wasn't there that long, unfortunately, less than a year, and only because I actually got a really bad pneumonia when I was up there. So it kind of started off as a flu. So I took a couple days. I mean, I can't really take days off school. So I, like, when you're there, you live across the street. So my house is across the street from the school. So it's such a different environment. But I basically was staying home because I had no energy, and I thought it was a flu at first. Like, that's what it seemed like. But it kind of became worse and worse. And I remember one day I went to school, And there's this one girl, she's in grade 3, I think it was. Obviously, very big height difference. And she comes up to me, she looks way up at me, and she's like, "Why are you here?" And I said, "What do you mean? I have to be here." And she's like, "No, you don't look good. You should go home." And just those little, kids are very direct with you. They don't really anything else. So that kind of woke me up to be like, maybe I should go get checked out. There's no hospitals or anything like that. So there's a nursing station. So I went to the nursing station and I said, I don't feel well, et cetera, et cetera. So the nurse came, checked me out, and said, the doctor happens to be here today. And what I mean is the doctor only comes for about 3 days a month. So they fly in, they're there for 2 or 3 days, and then they leave again. And the next month they come back. So to get care, a lot of people leave. So they actually have to fly themselves out to a bigger city to get care and come back. So they said, the doctor happens to be here. Let me get him to check you out. So he checked me out, and he ended up saying, you have a pneumonia. I'm going to send you back to Toronto because I want you near a respirator just in case because it sounds bad. And it was actually really good he did that because it took me 2 months to recover. It was a really bad one. Yeah. So unfortunately, because of that, I didn't end up going back up. So that was a little bit of a very big lifestyle change back and then forth again. So that really created challenges for me. But eventually I got back on my feet and went back to where I was. But regardless, I think it was a great learning experience for me.
Absolutely. Whoa, whoa, that's quite an experience, if I would say so myself. Um, but what are some things that you noticed about the students that are different, that were different there than here? I know like there are a lot of key differences, but like, what are some subtle differences that you notice?
That's a good way to put it. I think one is, and I guess this is, I mean, everywhere you'll see some of this, but I think the ability to self regulate was a little different. So, meaning that oftentimes, yes, kids will act out and do different things, but there's a level to it. So, there's like kind of a threshold to that. When I was up north, I found a lot of students didn't have that threshold. So, they would act out in ways that were surprising sometimes, and I wouldn't expect it from them. They would kind of talk to each other in a way that was not rude necessarily, but it just kind of it was very blunt, if I can use that word, and it just came out in different ways. And then same for some of the parents. Some of the parents came and they also didn't really have the boundaries, so they would just come and just walk into my office and just start telling me things. And it's just a different, again, way of life, a way of doing things, because everyone knows everyone, and they just talk. They don't hold things back, and they don't try to be professional all the time about things. But sometimes it came out and it was a little bit shocking to me where I didn't really know what to do about it. So I think that was something I would say is subtle because it doesn't happen often. It's not like an all the time thing. I'm not trying to paint that picture, but when it does happen, you notice it and you're like, wow, that's an interesting scenario. But I think again, through all my equity work and all of the things we talked about, it's my learning and how do I address this and how do I respond to this in a way that's going to be respectful for that person.
Hmm, I see. So obviously, like you learned about the people there before going there, and like you educated yourself on best practices and their culture. What are some things that you actually had to unlearn when you got there, and like, it's actually not like that. So, what are some things that you actually unlearned about their culture after you spent the time with the people there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think unlearning is such a big part of learning, right? It's something a lot of us need to do. Whenever I talk about up north, I always talk about because I grew up here. I did the entire school system in Ontario. So all we learned about Indigenous people was that they lived on the land and they had long houses and sometimes teepees, depending on where they lived. And that was every textbook everywhere. That's pretty much all they talked about. Things like residential schools, of course, were not in the textbook. Other areas, all these things were not there. So, what my picture of them was this kind of, separate entity. So, they were this other culture. And a lot of the textbooks also talk about them in the past tense. So, they would have said, like, oh, this culture was this, this, this. So, when you get up there, it's kind of a reminder that this is not a was scenario. This is not something that happened in the past. So, oftentimes, when we talk about like the residential school system, we talk about it as it's in the past. It's something that happened a long time ago. It didn't happen a long time ago. The most recent school is less than 20 years old. It's not that long ago. There are people now that were in that school. So it's really recent. And so I think people kind of forget that. So I think I had to kind of realize, because again, as I said when I started my master's program, when you read it in an article or you read it in a paper, it's different, right? You feel somewhat disconnected to it because they're talking about something else that happens somewhere else. And I think as I do research, I always try to catch myself doing that because it's very easy to do. So when you read about, oh, there's a study of education in Switzerland and here's what happened, in your mind, you're like, okay, well, that's over there. That's happening to them, right? They're using that word them. It's something else. It's disconnected. And it's just trying to remind ourselves like these are people that are here now. This is actually happening. And it's easy to forget that, especially when you just read about something that it is happening, it is occurring, and we should kind of look at it with that lens of it's current and it's something that can still be addressed as we move forward. It's not something that is in the past and it's over now.
I see. So, what are some misconceptions that that educators end up instilling in themselves when they think about something they read as a past tense? So, say I read something and it's still happening, but I read it in the past tense. So I did not, I wouldn't say think about it, but I did not consider it as much as I should have going into this. What are some of the misconceptions I might have?
I think kind of like you said, I don't consider it in the same way, or I guess I don't know if I call it a misconception necessarily, but just the idea that it's done, it's over. And I think that's something that commonly comes up when you read in that tense. And you have to remember that they were written in that tense for a reason, right? So now that all these things are coming out, it's a lot different. But in that time, that's how the government and the current everyone that lives in the big cities and the urban areas were pitching it because they wanted to explain it as it's something that happened, but it's over now and you don't need to worry about it anymore. Whereas, as we said, that's not true. That's not what's happening. So I think that's a common thing to do is to try, like, again, to kind of disconnect yourself and say, well, this was in the past. So it's kind of like if you're reading about, World War II, for example, World War II is over. It is done. Yes, there's still a lot of people affected by it. PTSD is very real, and a lot of people have that. A lot of families have that. But the event itself is over. And so we kind of treat it like, okay, the event is over, right? We don't expect it to continue or to start up again. It doesn't really make sense at this point, considering we're almost 80, 90 years beyond it. But something like a residential school system or things like that, again, yes, it's technically over, but all the effects of it are still there. And we can't ignore all of those effects that come with it. And so I think for us, especially when we're not affected by it, by reading about it, you definitely have feelings of sympathy, empathy. Of course, those are going to come out, but it's also kind of just putting it back into your mind and reminding yourself that this could be happening now still. And it could be people that are still currently affected by this. And so the more we kind of push it into the past, the harder it is for those people to get the help they need and to get the support they need because slowly, slowly, those issues are being forgotten because we keep pushing them behind us.
I see. I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but what are some of these issues that you saw at Bearskin?
Um, I mean, generally, I can just say, there are mental health challenges in different areas. So by students, parents, community members, teachers as well. It was a community that had certain challenges in different ways, like every community does. I think the big difference is, again, I'm going to pick Toronto because that's where I live. Something happens. So we have, some event, car accident, a shooting, something like that. We don't feel connected to it unless we actually knew the people, right? So a lot of times that happens. I drive on the 401 every day. There's an accident every day, but it doesn't affect me in that way because I'm so disconnected from these people because there's millions of us here and I don't know 1% of them. Whereas up in a small community, very different. So again, that's me kind of unlearning and learning to realize that when something happens, it starts to affect multiple people, and sometimes everybody gets affected by that. And I think that's kind of something I noticed that would happen. So if there was an event or something happen, the whole community comes together. So oftentimes we shut everything down. School closes for the day, stores are closed for the day, except to help people. Everyone comes together and gathers, and we're all there to support each other. And I think that was some of the biggest learning I've ever seen to have something like that happen where just everything is affected and everyone says we need to focus on this now. And it's a communal understanding of that versus again a big city that's not feasible. That's not what happens here.
I see. So taking this back to something we were discussing before, so about AI, have you seen AI make the same mistake where it has not considered something that has happened as much as it should?
I guess like how much it should is subjective. So I
Hmm.
think that's the challenge. The biggest challenge with AI is, and we're starting to see this more and more, is it's based on probabilities. So the problem is that if the general consensus is XYZ, AI will give you the result XYZ. So meaning that let's say we look at I want to do an activity. I want it to be equity focused, things like that. And I want it to focus around indigenous culture. It's going to pull from data sources that are most common rather than maybe the ones that are the best ones. So the best ones to me would be indigenous people. Who better to tell you about indigenous culture than someone that is indigenous or a community that's indigenous? But instead, it's going to go to other places. It's going to go to research articles about indigenous people. It's going to go to studies about indigenous people. It's going to maybe find some movies or some other sources that talk about indigenous people, sometimes written by indigenous people, of course, but also sometimes not. Sometimes it's more people from down south, as we call them, that are writing about it based on their own experience. So, like if I were to write an article on my experience, kind of the same idea. That's how it would come up. It would be my opinion on what I think I saw or my experience and how that's different from whatever their actual experience is. So I think one of the big challenges is making sure that when you're using AI, it's going to just be cognizant. It's going to pull from whatever the common consensus is, whatever that happens to be. And you have to kind of be aware that you don't want that. So sometimes, and I think this is the challenge with AI, it's not going to find those nuances because it's not looking for them. It's looking for what's the most probable answer, and it's going to give you that probable answer. It's not going to give you that nuanced answer you're hoping for because it's not part of the data sources.
I see. Um, so, looking at it from like a student's perspective, say I want to use AI to do an assignment. What is a right way to use it, and what is a wrong way to use it? Say, okay, so sorry, I realized that I made that question a bit vague. Say the assignment is about writing an essay on my experience at Bearskin. Like, what is a right way to do it, and what is a wrong way to do it?
Okay. Well, let me ask you, what do you think a wrong way to do it is?
Is just prompt like, hey, I went to Bearskin Lake, Ontario. I learned about the people there. Write a 2,000 word essay on it.
There you go. Good. And I think that's the concern everyone has, the way you just put it, because they assume that's what everyone's doing. Everyone is saying, "You write it for me." I know it's my experience, but you tell me. You tell me what you think. And again, the problem with that is it's not I mean, it doesn't know your experience, number 1, and it's not going to pull from that. It's going to pull from whatever it can find on Bearskin Lake, and then again, what's the most probable answer that you're probably trying to get. I mean, there's other issues there like plagiarism, ethical issues, because you didn't actually write an essay. The AI wrote an essay, and you just took it and said, now it's my essay. So that's a whole big issue, which I don't agree with, and I don't think anyone should be using it in that way. A good way to do it as a student would be to start to help it to form your answers. So feed it some ideas of what you want to talk about. So start to say, okay, well, in Bearskin Lake, I noticed, the sunlight was really challenging for me, and I noticed that I was getting a little challenged with not having a lot of sunlight. I didn't know what to do. The cold coming early was a big challenge for me, and so ask it as well. Help me figure out why these were challenges for me, and then it will start to ask you questions. And I think this is where AI could really be used. That it may be underutilized right now by a lot of people. But I have done a thing where I would ask it and I say, I'm trying to write a paper on this, or I'm trying to write an article on this, whatever it might be. Here's some experience. I want you to ask me questions to try to help me solidify these ideas or to make them more clear. And so I'll just feed it something. So, like I said, the sunlight was really challenging. So then it'll ask me back a question and it'll say, okay, why was the sunlight challenging? Did it make you feel differently? Did you find it change your routine? It'll start asking you things that get you thinking. And now I can start talking about, oh, my routine did change actually because of the sunlight. I always tried to go for a walk after school because when there's still a little bit of light left, I enjoyed that and I wanted to do that. On the weekends, usually I sit around and do nothing. Now every weekend I went out because I wanted to enjoy those 4 hours of sunlight because we didn't get much. And again, it's now I didn't think of any of those things, but now that I got it to start questioning me, it lets me think about this and put it together. I could ask it to summarize that for me, so I can give it back to it, and then so you just create me a summary, and then use that summary to write your actual paper.
Got it. So taking it back to like the idea generation piece, this is basically what you're doing, right? Like it's originally your idea, and like the AI is just building up on it with necessarily not losing the core. So, as an educator, if I am evaluating a essay, um, and I use Turnitin and say 20% of it is AI generated, how do I then do the due diligence of it not being like a wrong utilization of AI against like a correct utilization of AI?
I mean, one way you just said it. So, I mean, if turn-in is what's being used, do that. Like, put it in and see what it comes back with. I mean, if depending on how you used it, you shouldn't be surprised by the number you get. So, if it comes back with 20%, that shouldn't be a surprise to you because you know you put 20% of it, which just means that you took 20% of what it had and you copy and pasted it into your essay. That's what that means, right? I do want to point out that those AI plagiarism detectors are not fantastic, and we all kind of know this. They don't work as well as they should. So sometimes they are 100% right and 100% wrong. Like they could be completely all over the place. As educators, and I know this is a big challenge that we have, is like, how do we figure out if students are using it? Because not every school has Turnitin and these subscriptions because they're pretty expensive. So sometimes it's just kind of figuring out, like, did the student write this or not? And the way we do that usually is, does it sound like them? So my easiest strategy that I use with my instructors is if you get something back and you're looking at it and you're like, this doesn't sound like the student. Like I've seen their work before, I've seen their writing. This is, it's very high level, it's very polished suddenly. The grammar is perfect for some reason. Everything is a little different, or even just the thoughts and the ideas they're using are different. All of that has changed as well. The easiest way to figure it out is just talk to the student. So sit them down for 5 minutes on a Zoom call in person and just say, "Tell me about your essay." And if they wrote it, they can talk for an hour because they wrote it and they spent all that time and energy writing it. If you find they're struggling to tell you anything, start asking follow-up questions. So, oh, you talked about this. Can you explain this a little bit more? They won't be able to at the end of the day. And then usually by then it comes out. Like, yes, I did. I didn't actually write this. I used the AI too much, whatever it might be. So I think, from an educator side, that's kind of what we're looking at. From a user side, it's just like anything, right? If I go on Google and I find a great source, I don't use that source by just copy big chunks of it into my essay and say, now it's mine, because that's not how we do academic writing or any kind of writing. You shouldn't be doing it in that way. So it's kind of the same idea. The easiest way is get the AI to make you notes and then paraphrase them into what you need to do. Because as you said, it's still your ideas that you were working with. You're just trying to use that as your basis for what you're going to next.
Understood. Okay, so use AI to build up on your ideas and don't just ask it to write the essay for you. I see.
Yep.
So, would you say that the tone of which the essay is written in is a big indicator or a big giveaway if the student if the student has used AI to write it?
It can be unless they're good at using AI. And what I mean is, I can get it to write me something, and then I can give it one of my actual pieces of paper that I've written and say, write it in my style. And then it'll just write it in my style. So, the challenge I think is a lot of people are thinking of how we used to detect plagiarism and how we used to look for it, right? So, the biggest difference now is the AI is powerful enough where if you treat it like an arms race, so meaning that student's going to do this, I'm going to do this. Student's going to do that, I'm going to do that. You will never win because the AI is just it's such a big jump in technology. It's kind of like when Google first came out, right? People didn't like Google or any search engine. They didn't like them because they're like, no one's going to do any work. No one's going to research. You can just find anything now. The good old days of going to the library and finding your book and sitting there and reading it, that's all gone because you can do it all with Google now. People are going to stop learning. Like all these things came out. If you look back to all the news articles around that time, that's what people were talking about. That didn't happen. We adapted. And so with AI, I think it's going to be the same thing. We're going to adapt into it. Right now, we're in that kind of in between where not everyone understands it. And so the people that do understand it, if your objective is to cheat, which I mean, it might be as a student, if that's already you, you're just using this as a tool to do it. And so I always explain this to my educators that I work with and people I mentor. They were going to cheat regardless. That was already their intention. They just found a good tool to do it. If they didn't use this, they would have just found another way. Most people aren't in school to cheat. That's not their goal. They're there to learn because they want to better themselves. They want to get into their career. They want to do whatever it is they're trying to adapt to. And so that thought would just never cross their mind because that's just not them. Why would they ever want to do that? That doesn't help them. So if you kind of look at it from that perspective, you're still using similar methods to what you did before to detect things like plagiarism and all of those, but you're still only talking about a handful of people. And so once you start to learn a bit more and get a little more familiar with it, so doing things like picking up these books and reading them and learning a bit more, you'll understand what's possible and what's not possible. And then from there, you can always go back to the human element. So like I said, sit down with the person, talk to them. You'll very quickly realize, yes, they wrote it, no, they didn't. And then there you go, you have what you need to move forward. And, as we said, go to the policies, escalate, do all those things that exist as well.
Understood. That's a very interesting perspective. That AI is just a tool that the students who already want to cheat use. Hmm. That's very interesting. I never thought about it that way. But what does the future of AI look for educators?
I mean, I think it's a big question because there's so many possibilities right now. At this point, we don't know yet where it's going. Most people, as I said, are just using it to kind of supplement things they already do. I think one of the biggest things missing right now is we don't know what to do with it. And so what I mean is there are a lot of companies out there that are doing really fun things with it, but they're expensive. And so not everyone is willing to take an entire school or entire school board on board with one of these because we don't know yet. We haven't seen what it's going to do, how it's going to affect learning, how it's going to affect outcomes of learning. We don't know yet. And so right now everyone's just kind of testing the waters and let's see what happens. Let's try this. This didn't work. Let's try that. There are some websites, I remember the names now, I think it's in the end of my book, but the stats are like every day there's like 100 new AI things coming out and someone's building a program somewhere. Like it's an unbelievable number and it just keeps growing. So the amount of things available are just outstanding. But it's as an educator, from my perspective, is how do I figure out what to use, what's going to actually help. I think one thing we talk about a lot in education, you'll hear a lot about, is personalized learning. So that's a big one. So right now, one of the biggest challenges of any educator is I have 30 students in my class, and they're all very different from each other. The old style of learning, if you go back to 70s, 60s, 50s, was I'm going to teach you something. The ones that can pick it up, great, and the ones that can't, that's too bad. And that's how it was. It was very much a selection process. That's what it was designed for. It wasn't necessarily meant to adjust to each person. It was more meant to, I'm just going to teach you, and it's up to you to figure it out. Education has changed a lot since then, and now it's more about how do I, as a teacher and an educator, make sure that every student is learning and I'm meeting their needs wherever their needs are. And as an individual, this is difficult. So imagine having 25 you know 12-year-olds in front of you, and they're all different. How do you make sure every single one of them is learning exactly to their level that they should be? So this is where AI is coming in. There is one school down, I don't remember where it is, somewhere in the US, but they are an AI school now. So they actually have it set up where instead of teachers, they have, I can't remember the term, I think it's like facilitator, something like that. So they kind of help them along with their day, but most of the day is actually spent working with the AI. So they actually sit at a terminal or whatever it looks like. And the thing about the AI is as they're answering questions, it can exactly pinpoint where they are and give them a very individualized response and give them, okay, based on this, you're going to work on this next. Whereas in a classroom, you don't really have that ability, right? If I have 20 people in front of me, I don't have the ability to go to each person and say, okay, what are you doing? I'm going to give you this. What are you doing? I'm going to give you this. That's your whole day gone just for one activity. So that's one thing that we think it's leading towards is helping with more individualized learning. but we're trying to figure out how do we balance that with the human element of learning, because learning is not just about learning the concepts, learning all those techniques. It's also about how do I work with people? How do I build social skills? How do I work in a society? All of those things are also important. And we, at this moment, we can't get that from an AI. We don't know how. AI is missing that big component because it's not a human. It's not, it doesn't have that ability to do it. It can mimic it, it can try to figure it out, but at the end of the day, it's not going to. So if you ever talk to an AI, if you use like the voice ones, they're always so happy and helpful. If you've ever tried the voice chat on any of these, they're always like, "Oh, what do you need? Great to hear from you." Like they're always like that, and they're designed like that, which is good because I don't want it to be mad at me when I'm trying to ask a question. But at the same time, it's not realistic, right? You're not going to encounter people all day long that are always happy to see you and want to ask you questions and ask you, "Bench, how can I help you? What do you need next?" Right? That's not likely. So how do we balance those out, and how do we make sure that we can use it as a tool for personalized learning, but without taking over that whole other element of schooling, which is not just about learning multiplication tables and learning, scientific concepts and learning, reading some English books and understanding the concepts, but more about socialization and being in a society and emotional regulation and all these other pieces that come into what learning really is.
Right. So you talked about how it's going to affect learning, and that's what separates school from a course, right? The people, the socialization. Um, do you think there are AI applications to implement like socialization that's different from coursework?
That's a great question. I haven't seen any, to be honest. To be fair, I haven't looked much because, as I said, there's so many out there. I haven't heard of too many that are trying that route yet. Not that there aren't, and I'm sure maybe some people listening will know of some, but I haven't heard of any that are trying to tackle that. One of the big reasons is because the AI doesn't know how to tackle that. It doesn't have, to my understanding, again, I'm not, I don't program these things or anything like that. I'm nowhere near that level. But through my research, my understanding is it doesn't have that ability because all it's doing is pulling together data from, as I said, journal articles, websites, all these different places. But when we write things, we don't often write with emotion necessarily, right? So especially if it's a factual piece of work, like if you're publishing in a journal, it's not emotional at all, right? It's meant to not be emotional. It's meant to be, here are my objective facts, and it's very structured, and we all know what the structure looks like. So it's one of those things where it just doesn't have that ability, as far as we understand, at this moment. Now there could be some out there that people are working on that are starting to build that in somehow, however that looks like. But to my knowledge, I don't know of any that are ready to implement to actual kids that, or adult learners, whoever, because that now is an actual person that you could be changing their life, affecting their life. And so I haven't heard of any that are at that level yet, but I'm interested if you've heard of anything in that route.
Um, I haven't, but I feel like it'll be an important part of designing these self-paced courses, because I feel like, at least from my experience of being a student and talking to my friends, like students, especially kids, like a good story.
Yeah.
So in order to create that story, you need some emotion, you need some feelings behind those those facts that you're presenting. So I feel like moving forward, like this is something AI would be like this is something AI would implement, like the emotion aspect. You're right. There is not much research on it as of right now, but how do you think? What are some things that you have actually learned since you have written the book, and um, what are some new things or new discoveries that you found?
Yeah, no, it's a good question because it's kind of hard in your mind to think, okay, when did I stop the book, and then when did I keep learning after that,
Hmm.
right? So one of the things about writing this book is when I was done, I wasn't done, because what happened a lot of times was I finished it, I did my full read through, my draft, my edit, and then as I was reading through, I realized I said something like, this feature is not available. And then I realized by the time I was reading my draft, I was like, oh, they just added this feature. So I had to go back and change it. And I had to do that so many times. Eventually, I just stopped doing it because it was moving so quickly. So eventually, I got to the point of, and you'll see me in the book every so often, I'll just say, this may be added soon, and this was just announced. And I said, by the time you're reading this, it probably is already out. And there were all these other little features. Like the voice thing was very new when I was writing that book, and now it's, there's Copilot, ChatGPT has it. It's a very common feature, but at the time it was not there yet. It was brand new. So since then, I guess it's hard to distinguish exactly. But I know a lot of programs have come out since. So, like we were talking about, there's a lot that exists, thousands, millions probably at this point. Um, One I use a lot is Magic School AI. So, that's a big one. So, we've trained our staff on it as well. It's it's an AI. Like that's what it does. It does everything that like ChatGPT does, all of those things. The difference is that they've created kind of subparts of it where it only does one thing. So what I mean is I would click on something that this part of the AI, it's only going to create an assessment. That's all it does. So the database they use, instead of using the entire possible database, which is like, the whole internet essentially, I'm just going to take information on making assessments from reputable sources. And when it creates an answer, that's all it's using is just those sources. So you pretty much always get very reliable assessments. So it's going to create something where I need a rubric made, and it's going to make it based on certain standards, and it's going to pretty much always be correct and what I was hoping for and what I was looking for. So it's really useful for that sense. And the thing I find is they just keep adding stuff to it. So there's, now you can make a newsletter for parents. Now you can respond to an email, which is what I use it a lot for. Just all these different things on there. That's just really helpful. Like most things, it's free, but there's a subscription. So like pretty much everything now. But that's one that kind of sticks out to me because we just found it was user friendly. Because the challenge with something like ChatGPT, I can use it for the same thing, but it's a lot more work to get it down to that level of I only want you to look at this. I want you to focus on these requirements. Here's the information you need, and then here's the output I wanted it. So it kind of takes all that out of it for you, where you just need to prompt it. I need a rubric for this, and it just gives you a rubric, and it's a lot faster and a lot quicker. So that's a big one I've found. The other one that's really been changing that I notice almost every couple months now is Notebook LM from Google. So they've been doing a lot with it. The big benefit I find to Notebook LM is that you can give it the sources. So, in other words, you can say, okay, here is my curriculum, and here are the policy documents for my school. And now I need you to make this. And what it's going to do is it's only going to pull from that information in order to make something. And so I found it really helpful for that reason because, especially when you're doing something like, how do I respond to the student? It's going to give you like a million answers because it's just going to say, well, this is what most schools will do. But I need to know what am I allowed to do in my school? That's the important question. So, again, in my context, what matters to me? So it's able to do that. So you can give it, I think, like 200 sources or some number like that. And it could be anything. It could be videos. It could be notes. It could be just like anything. I can't think anything. Like you can find anything you want and throw it in there, and it can be used as a source. And then the other big thing they're adding is all the outputs are changing. So it used to just be some text, which is great. And then they started adding flowcharts. So if you have a process, you can throw a process in there, and it'll give you a flowchart to show you what it looks like, which is great for visual learners. Now it can give you a podcast, which is like it blew my mind when it happened. So you can just feed it some information and say, make a podcast. And it actually has two people talking in like, just like we're doing right now in a podcast. And it just completely blew my mind. They've added video recently, so it can make a full video for you. They've added slideshows recently. So it's one of those tools that is really easy to use because it's Google. Google's great at doing that. And it's free, which I like. That's another big plus because a lot of these things are becoming behind paywalls, which is just making it less accessible, right? So how can we get everyone to learn about AI if we keep throwing paywalls and everything? So I think that's another great one that I use a lot myself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So at least I use Notebook 11 as well. So I have like theory classes, which is like a lot of like readings and a lot of um, remembering. I am not a fan of that. At least, at least as a student, I am more of like the um, the applier of skills, like coding, labs. That's my thing. But in order to prepare for those theory classes, I have quite a long commute on my way to school. So I just give it to Notebook LM. It makes a podcast for me. And by the time I'm at school, I've got all my readings done and I'm ready for the class. So that's one way I have used the podcast feature.
That's great. I love that.
But s- I just want to know, as an educator, what are some key things that you look for in the perfect AI tool?
I mean, number one, as with everything, is the user interface. It has to be easy to use. A lot of our instructors and staff, they're not necessarily AI tech savvy. For me, it's been a personal thing. That's why I'm into it because I just enjoy it. I like doing it. I'm the kind of, when I was a kid in the 90s, I would just take apart computers for fun because I just enjoyed doing it. And also in the 90s, you had nothing else to do, so you found stuff to do. So I'm that kind of person. I've always been like, how does this work? Let me figure it out. So when AI came out, I just started exploring it a bit and trying to find out, like, how do I use this? What do I do with it? So I think user interface is one because not everyone is like that and they need something that makes sense to them. It's easy to use. It doesn't often mess up because the harder that barrier is, they're just going to turn it off. They're going to try it once. It's going to be so difficult. I don't get it. And the response makes no sense. Why would I try this again? I'm not going to use it. And, with every new technology adoption, I think that's normal, right? It takes a long time for people to get over that curb until it gets to that level of, wow, this is actually really easy. I just click, 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 and there you go. I'm good. So that's one big element. The other element is, as you talk about in the book, is things like hallucinations, which, in my book, I kind of mentioned, it happens, but it's not as common, I feel, as people think. Because for our purposes as educators, I found it's hard to get it to hallucinate. So in my book, I had to try to make it hallucinate to show the reader, and I couldn't do it. So I had to make something up. There was just no way to do it. Like, it's not. I tried to make it talk about something scientific because I'm a science teacher. That's my background. And I told it to hallucinate, and it still didn't hallucinate well. And then another time off the book, I tried to say, okay, make really significant hallucinations, but then it became nonsense. So it just became, the cell is made up of protons and neutrons and apples. Like, it made no sense. And I couldn't use it. It was too far away from being a hallucination. Hallucinations are things where they look like they could be real. They seem to be, they appear real, but they're not factual. And so those are the challenges with AI, especially if people are just using them as, I'm going to put in my prompt, I got my output, I'm copy pasting to my assignment, I'm handing it in. Right? Those are the people that are going to find the most challenges because when someone reads that, they're going to be like, a lot of this actually doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. So that is, I think, one of the other things is the less it hallucinates, the better because that's how you build trust in using it. So just like with, if you think of things like online banking, people were not comfortable with online banking because they thought, oh my gosh, my data is going to be stolen, all my money's gone. And that's a big thing, of course, for many people. Now it's so common. Most people have a banking app on their phone and they're happy to do transfers online and pay their bills online and do all of those things. But if you go back even 10 years, very different. And you look into what people were doing then, it was not the same. People were very hesitant to do it because they said, no, I'd rather go to the bank. And so, like I have my own mom, she goes to the bank. That's her way. She's like, I don't even want to learn this. She's okay with tech. Like, we bought her a tablet and she likes using it and she enjoys it. And she's learning and she always messages me these things of like, oh, this is fun. And I learned this thing, watch this YouTube video. So I'm like, when did you learn to do all this stuff? So she's into it, but there's certain kind of boundaries for her, right? So banking is one. She's like, I don't trust it. It's not enough. I've heard these stories, people steal your identity, all that stuff. She's like, it's not worth it to me. The bank is a 10-minute walk. I'm just going to the bank. And that makes sense. So I think it's the same thing. If it's not worth it to the person, why would they switch? There's no reason to switch. If I can do it in the same way that I'm doing now, I don't even want to try to change. That's also a lot of work, right? Change is a lot of effort. It takes a lot to make a change and to keep a change. So if it's not user friendly, if it's not accurate, those two to me are the biggest ones. I'm not going to switch to it. Why would I?
Hmm. So, in your experience with talking to these educators, what is some skepticism you have seen around AI?
So the number one that always comes up, which I'm sure you can guess, is they're using it to cheat. Always. So they said, I don't even want to introduce it to them because the more they find out, the more they're going to cheat. So that's, again, one of the biggest things that comes out. Where to me, that's just, I'm scared of learning the technology because I feel like the more I know and the more I share with my students, the more they're going to realize, whoa, I can do this, I can do that, and that's really good. But again, back to the previous conversation we had, most people aren't in school to cheat. It's not as common as we think. So yes, I'm sure every educator listening to this or every person listening to this can think of someone like, oh yeah, I saw this person cheat. But if you think about everybody else, they have no desire to. It's not something that most people are interested in. So I think that's kind of one of the big ones is they think it's for cheating. I mean, that's kind of number one, right? Um, Outside of that, though, I think it's I don't know how to say. It's more about like what else could I use it for, I guess, if that makes sense. So like what are the other options? What's available to me? What does it do? So I think most people where they get information about AI is the news, which are never good because that's what the news is for. It's for sensationalism. It's for telling you these amazing things or these terrible things. So I think they need more sources of information, more use cases. How are people using it right now is really going to help to shift their mindset a bit about why I'm using it, what it's for, how it could be used. And as people see the interesting things that are being done, suddenly they're like, oh, this actually sounds kind of interesting. I would like to do that too. That connects with me now. And that's how you're going to start to, bring people over. That's how it's been working for the last couple of years, right? As people find out things, they're like, oh, I didn't know it can do that. That's interesting. So with my staff, I've done a lot of training on it to try to just give them ideas. So I called it the AI toolbox. And I explained it as you don't have to use this. That's not why I'm teaching it to you. It's so that you're aware of it and you can decide what you want to do with it, but at least you're aware of it and you know it. So if a student brings it up, if a colleague brings it up, or if you have a problem, you can think, oh, maybe I could use it to solve this. And then there you go. Now you're using it for a good purpose and you're actually drawn into it.
Understood. So, just to summarize everything, now that you wrote this book as a step-by-step guide to implementation in the classroom. Now, if you had to summarize your message, obviously, like this book is excellent. It covers uh, all the key points of how to correctly use AI. But if I had to sum it up, like what would be the message that you're trying to give to the educators who are curious about AI through this book?
Oh, that's a great question because I'm trying to break down all my chapters and like, how do I sum that up into one thing? I think it's really about. I mean, kind of as we've been chatting about, it's something that you have to try, but I understand you need some guidance, and so this is really just to help you. AI is not meant to change things to the point of replacement. That's not the goal. For me as an educator, I don't think we're anywhere near that. I think it's more about how exactly do I use this as a tool? What is it that's going to make this a useful tool for me? So I think my book really kind of gives you, as you said, those step-by-step guides, but it's really about what is it in this book, which pieces of those are resonating with you, what's going to help you to understand it as a tool so you can use it more effectively, or when your students bring it to you so that you can speak knowledgeably about it and you understand what they're talking about, which as you work with, especially if you work with kids, it's hard to do that because they're always 10 steps ahead of us. But it's just really giving them the tools essentially that they need to be able to use it more confidently and to hopefully explore more, right? That's really the hope is when you're done the book, and I talk about this in the last chapter, keep exploring. There's like as I said, there's so much out there. It's unbelievable, right? Research, tools that are coming out, all the different applications that are being used. It's enormous, and so I know that's kind of the scary part of it is I don't even know where to start, and so that's why I wrote this. It's a place to start. It's a place to give you that initial steps. From there, I hope you will take it and go wherever you want with it, and tell me how it went because I would love to hear that too as people go on their journeys because that's how I learn as well. I hear what people are doing, and I said that's great. Let me learn that, or that's great. Show me. I would like to see that too. And that's how I think as educators we naturally do it. We all learn that way. You don't do everything yourself. You don't reinvent the wheel. There's no purpose to that. It's more about how do we as educators come together to see what are the most useful cases and then what are the guardrails that we need to put in place to make sure it's being used the way we're intending.
Understood. Understood. So, from a broader perspective, I have my last question for you.
Okay.
What is the best piece of advice you have heard or received?
In general, like not
Yeah.
even AI related? Oh, I like that. That's a great question. Um, Best piece of advice I've ever heard or received. I'm trying to go through like my whole life in my mind and find it for you. Um, I think when I actually talked about this recently with my fiance. So she was having a challenging scenario with someone at work. So she's a coach, and so she works with training some of the new staff that come in. And so they had a scenario where they had to let a staff go. So that happens sometimes. It is, kind of part of the process. And she was really having a hard time with it. Like she was really stressed out about it. And so I thought back to when I was up in Bearskin Lake, just tying back to that. One of my mentors, so he was in one of the school boards up there for about 30 years, and he was just phenomenal person. He would fly up every so often to check on me, and he would stay with us for a little bit and just make sure everything was going well. And he happened to be up there when we had a really significant issue come up, and I don't know what I would have done without him. But one of the things he told me was, as long as at the end of the day, whatever happened in your job, in your personal life, all the decisions you made, all the things that happened, at the end of the day, if you're able to go to your bed and put your head down on your pillow and fall asleep, just know that you did everything you could do. Because if you're able to do that, that means there's nothing lingering that you thought, I should have done this differently. I did this wrong. I did that unethically. I did that in a way that I shouldn't. None of those feelings will be there because you're able to do that at the end of the night. So his message he was trying to get across was you are not going to solve every problem. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to be able to, especially in education. We would love to be able to help and support every student. We all do want that. But realistically, there are some that we will not be able to for whatever reason. It could be beyond our control, something in the student's life happening, something in the bigger community happening, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, if you know that you did everything you can do, just be comfortable with that and know that you tried. You put everything, you put every effort forward. At the end of the day, it just was not meant to be at that moment. It just did not work out for the student in that moment.
Wow, that is very insightful. And it takes me back to something I learned about gratitude,
Mm.
that it is very important in life to be grateful. Like it helps you stay optimistic. And to be honest, in my experience, the optimists always win. Uh, so thank you so much for your insights. And it was absolutely an honor to hear about your experience with AI. And I know there are many amazing things to come. And I hope I keep having you back on my podcast.
Oh, I would love that. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.